That wraps that up for announcements. I'm going to introduce you to our speaker, Mr. Cleere, who we're very excited to have with us. Mr. Cleere has had lots of experience as a special investigator for DFPS. He honorably retired after 26 years in service, has a master's degree from the University of Texas at Dallas, where he studied law, sociology, and political science. He has 12 years with the DFPS as an investigator and 8 years in children's advocacy in both Dallas and here in Tyler. So without further ado, we are welcoming Mr. Cleere to come talk to us about his experiences as an investigator. And let me make sure.
And thank you for those that are virtually here. I tend to walk around a little bit, so if you're trying to find me on camera, you may lose me from time to time. Before I start talking about myself, which I'm not as comfortable with as you might think after we're done, I would like to explain the only reason I'm here is because hundreds of really good, dedicated professionals sent me here. They did it in every training I ever attended, in every classification I ever got, and every kind of degree I ever obtained. It was because there was a professional passing on their knowledge and experience to me, and that's my goal, is to give back and do the same thing. So if it sounds like I'm talking about me, I'm also talking about all the people whose shoulders I'm standing on. And I don't ever want to forget, they're the ones that put me here. My name is Wayne Cleere. I'm the special investigator. That's my actual title, not what I am. I work for the state of Texas Department of Family Protective Services. Special Investigations is now their own entity within DFPS. We were created by legislative act in 2005. I retired from the Mesquite Police Department in 2006, didn't know what a special investigator was. Got mail from these people, threw it away. I was not interested in working at the time. But they were created in 2005. The first special investigators actually took chairs in DFPS buildings in 2006, and they've been functioning ever since. So it's a young-ish agency for the state. There are roughly 180 plus special investigators throughout the state. We have 8 investigators working the 26 counties that are here in Northeast Texas that we call Region 4. I represent Smith County and the Smith County Children's Advocacy Center. That's where I'm housed, and I love working there. It's a great place. The special investigations, we wear a lot of hats. We work for a lot of agencies. The majority of our investigations are through Child Protective Services, or CPI, which is Child Protective Investigations. We assist with whatever they ask us to. We also work for Adult Protective Services, especially charges of sexual assault of the elderly, or a suspicious or homicidal death, or something that they need our expertise in as well. We work with adoptive services, family-based services, conservatorship, which really concerns CASA. And I want to share 2 quick CASA stories with you about how I was introduced to CASA and how they were both extremely positive. My first encounter, not knowing anything about CASA, was when I was a patrol officer, probably late 80s, early 90s. And we got a call that there was a teenager attempting suicide. We couldn't get exact location. We needed to try to find this kid, intervene, get medical out, whatever. But we didn't have a place to start. I said, how do we know this is going on? Or are we talking about suicide prevention? Because we're used to getting calls from them and working. And I said, no, this is lady works for CASA. Her kid called her. Wouldn't call anybody else. She had a very cool husband who was a retired military officer who was also a ham radio operator. And he's on the ham radio calling somebody in San Antonio who's calling us, telling us that this is all happening in Mesquite. Worked out well. We were able to find the teenager, then some help. And that was how I was introduced to CASA. I didn't know what CASA was. She had to explain it to me. And so I had an inkling. Several years later, I was a foster parent, and we received a baby boy who was 3 days old. After a full year, we were able to complete the adoption, and we got to be very friendly with a CASA worker who was in and out of our lives for about 11 months. What are you going to do with an infant? We can't really talk to them. How are they treating you? What's going on? But she talked to us, and she became part of the circle of friends we inherited doing foster care. And one thing about doing foster care, I've got to say, the biggest problem for me was the invasion of privacy. Because you have CPS in your life, you have conservatorship in your life, you have the court-appointed attorney for the baby who's in your life, you have CASA that's in your life. And all these people don't always call when they're coming over. So having 3 other biological children, which was hilarious because no one ever asked them anything. They would step over them to check on the baby, and my kids could be laying bare naked on the floor and they'd ignore them. But those are how I got introduced to CASA. And of course, over the decades, much more experience and some very positive experiences with them. As far as special investigations, who are they? You have to have a law enforcement background. It has to include investigative experience. Like I said, we were created in 2005 by an act of legislature here in Texas. And my authority comes from 2 main sources, from the Texas Family Code and from the Texas Education Code. So of that 180 plus special investigators in the state, all of us are former law enforcement in one stage or another. What do we do? And this list, from the initial list I sent in to this one, got added to, because I keep forgetting all the stuff I do. We do school investigations. Now, the only school investigation we do are between school staff and students. That includes everything from allegations of abuse or neglect to sexual assault, sexting, which has become a monumental problem that you would think would go away with the publicity that's gotten. But we do a lot of those cases. Or child deaths, which includes going to autopsies and working very closely with law enforcement, medical, et cetera. Serious bodily injury cases, sexual abuse, missing children. We have several categories of missing children that we deal with. The one that concerns CASA the most is children who are in conservatorship who run away. And I've been very happy to say one of the first, when I came to the Dallas CAC, one of the first major cases I had with CASA, we had a 16-year-old girl who we all knew she was on the radar to be trafficked. We all knew that. Everyone worried to death about this kid. She had a very violent and resourceful pimp that had been running her for a while. You could not convince this child that he was evil and he was mean. So when she disappears one night, her foster family calls her in immediately. She's gone. We can't find her. There's $40 missing, from the kitchen fund, but she has no transportation. She's got no identification with her. We're worried death about her. So we start this giant searching pattern. Can't find this girl. We're looking at her. Got a picture out with different police agencies, checking all the hotels close by. And finally, her CASA worker gets a phone call. Please come help me. I don't trust the police. I don't trust anybody else. I need to go to the hospital. I'm in bad shape. So the CASA worker, thank God, did the right thing. She called us anyway. The police called us because she's on our paperwork as well. And everybody gets together, does the right thing, gets an ambulance out and goes and finds her. The fun part was Pimp's car died in the parking lot trying to get away. He went to jail. He had beaten her severely and had been starving her. for the most part, to maintain control. But you trust your CASA worker and trust her enough to call her and beg for help. And it was just amazing to me sometimes the bonds that these kids will form, because they too, just like being a foster parent, when you're in the system, you have a lot of people thrown at you. You have a CVS worker, a CPS worker, and an attorney that you never trust attorneys anyway. Trust police just a little less than you trust your attorneys. And these kids are scared. They're out of their element. They all think they're grown up. They all think they can handle whatever gets thrown at them. But there are all these agencies that are there trying to help them survive to the point where they take care of themselves. For that, I am very thankful for CASA's role in that development. And the fact that somebody does get close enough to these kids to establish a relationship, it makes what I do a whole lot easier. I've had conversations with CASA workers before that I need to talk to you about my case, but I promise not to talk to you. But I've got to, well, there's this really boring, huge book called the Texas Family Code says you have to talk to me. So go ahead. It's all right. If it's for the benefit of the child, I'll listen to anything. Nothing says I can't bend a rule just as well as anyone else. But I'm going to always approach this from, I have an obligation under the law to look after the best interest of the child, period. Just as you're sworn in through the courts, so are we. And I've been sworn at more than you have, most likely. But we do missing children that are missing from conservatorship. Also, children whose families take off during a CPS investigation. And we have to help in trying to find them. We have a lot of different tools that we use, not a lot, I say a lot. We have more now than we ever had before. But that's kind of something we specialize in, is trying to find these adults who are running from CPS, because everybody hears the word CPS and the first thing they think of, they're going to come snatch my kids. Well, maybe if you're really bad enough, but that's not my job. I'm happy. We work as law enforcement liaison, and we work for everybody from Homeland Security to the FBI to the State Department of Public Safety, Texas Rangers, as well as certain task forces such as Missing Children's Task Force and Human Trafficking Task Forces. We work with the county and with the state and with local law enforcement. In the hallway where I'm at the Children's Advocacy Center, are 2 detectives from the Smith County Sheriff's Office and 2 detectives from the city of Tyler. Our doors are open to each other. We are in and out all the time. Hey, can you get me this? Can you find out about this kid? Can you find out if this kid's ever been handled before? Where were they living? You know, and so we trade resources. We do it very openly, and it's all in the best interest of getting something done for these children and not wasting everybody's time trying to go through some bureaucratic loophole to get there. We also work with district attorneys and prosecutors and anyone else associated with courts. The MDT, for those not familiar, the MDT is one of the most wonderful things in the world that helps kids more than, as well as almost invisible associations, but it's the multidisciplinary task force. We incorporate everyone monthly to meetings, from the district attorney here in Smith County to the medical representatives who do the majority of our testing for us and explaining medical jargon. I'm sorry, it's worse than NCIC sometimes. We have representatives from law enforcement, we have representatives from CPS or whatever agency has called us in, and then we'll have a special investigator depending on the type of cases. But we have these meetings just to do case review, just to find out, okay, how did the kids come into our care? Well, this happened. And this family is where they're, as far as we know, they're here. And we're doing what? Well, there's an indictment, grand jury, referral, whatever. And the kids are receiving counseling and therapy services, and where they're receiving it, how they're doing with it, and whether or not they're showing up. All that gets covered in that meeting. I'm not a counselor. I'm not a therapist. It's probably the best thing ever for some of these kids. But I work with some amazing therapists and counselors that do contribute greatly to these kids if we can get them into these areas, because the kids have been traumatized by whatever brings them to me. We work with accidents, and we work with on purpose, and we work with kids who need help. That's every day. That's what we do. But we do specialized bits and parts of it. Also, we work with medical, and there's several kinds. I'm going to talk about that here in just a different slide. And yet there's more. We also do high profile or media cases, someone from the political realm, from the religious realm, from CPS employees, internal employee investigations. We do those investigations because the reason the Senate created us in 2005 was that CPS was doing a really difficult job with public relations and trying to manage these kind of cases. So they put that on us. I figure more experienced investigative experience will result in more professional investigation, and I sure hope that's the thing, because that's what pays my paycheck. As explained, we do human trafficking. We teach and do mentoring. I teach, along with other SIs, we teach now 30% of the curriculum of new CPS employees in their basic academy. That's up from 5%. So we're doing 30% of the training for every new employee in the state of Texas comes from an SI. And we also do updated training that comes through, depending on whatever the curriculum needs are. We also issue a C-Scout. And anybody in here ever heard of a C-Scout? You know what that is? Okay, most police agencies that I also did this class with, they don't know either, and yet they have to study it every 2 years because it's part of Texas state law now. A C-Scout means Child Safety Concern Alert. It's only in Texas. It is one of the tools we have that has been very effective with finding these kids that belong to families who have just taken off. I mean, we literally get there and there's toys in the driveway leading up to where they got in the car and left. And we may be hours behind, days behind, but if after certain criteria goes by, 20 days of investigation with no contact, then we issue what's called a C-Scout. Now, a C-Scout goes out to all police agencies in the state of Texas. It does not cross any borders. It doesn't go to Louisiana or Oklahoma or Arkansas. But if, say, you're on a C-Scout with 2 children, we need to see those kids just to make sure they're okay. But we can't find you, and you're not talking to your family. They're all mad because I don't know where she's at. She's got my car. So you get stopped in Lubbock, and because you got a tail light out, and when that officer runs you, bing, there's a C-Scout alert. Says 2 children are missing. Looks in the car, doesn't see any kids. Where are these 2 kids? You start that on the street investigation. At least we found mom. Now we'd like to find out where the kids are. Mom says, I'm not telling you anything. Now, that decision meter that's going on in the officer's head on whether or not you should be arrested for a tail light out probably just peaked way over here. Because now that officer too has an interest in finding out, well, where are these kids? Rather not leave a loose end. So it does help. There's some pressure that gets applied to at least get CPS back in these child's lives and get somebody watching out for them, finding out what's going on. So it's really nice when it works, and it does work from time to time. Then there's legal, courts and CASA. It was hard to find, when I was looking for images, it was hard to find any with people smiling while doing this. It's probably federal jury duty or something, the way they're dressed, but I can't, there's no way to enumerate how many times I've been in court. Probably in the thousands, between municipal court over traffic tickets and whatnot. The district court, I worked, and I lost count, and I apologize for that. I worked over 24 homicides when I was in Mesquite, and I think the number is of capital cases that I testified in was 11, and the death penalty was issued at least 5 of those. So a lot of heavy duty court appearance and whatnot goes on, but we do that. We also teach court appearance preparation for that academy class I was talking about. But because of the courts, that's where we meet a lot of CASA workers, because we're showing up for the same sort of events, depending on the scope of the case. And there's a slide in here later that's going to explain some of this, but it's kind of nice for me because I've worked for government since 1980, which is a really long time. It's nice to see someone who's not influenced by whatever government, political, whatever is going on, is still there for that kid. It's nice to run into somebody who's not beholden to the state of Texas or the local law enforcement or even that judge. It's independent review, and it's, let's face it, checks and balances are how we built this rock we stand on. It's nice to have that human check and balance to a bureaucratic system, because if they see something wrong, they're allowed to say so, and they have the ear of the judge. And most judges are very responsive to words spoken through any CASA volunteer worth their salt, because they depend on the information that they're not going to get from anywhere else. But as I said earlier, we are sworn in, same as you, and we become officers of the court once that happens. So the obligation for special investigators is always to try to deliver as much factual data and truth to the equation as we know how. Was asked when putting this together, let's talk about how you build a case. So we're going to talk about how cases come to special investigations, how they start. First off, there's this organization in Austin called Statewide Intake, SWI for us. But Statewide Intake does 99.9% of all CPS cases that go out, adult protective services cases that go out, come through Statewide Intake. And that's through law enforcement, hospitals, pediatricians, school teachers, people that are trained and recognize what child abuse looks like, what it smells like, what it tastes like. They call Statewide Intake. And Statewide Intake sends an assignment to a division. Like I said, I'm Region 4. And we're going to talk about what that means here in a little bit. But it'll go to a Region 4 supervisor who will decide who's going to work this case. The assessment of additional resources, that's us. If it doesn't go to a regular CPS or APS unit, then or if it does and they decide we can't do this by ourselves, this guy's crazy, he's an axe murderer, he's out on prison, parole. So they'll assign one of us to help so that we can really enforce worker safety standards during this investigation and try to be safe and get the job done for each child. Then the assignment of special investigations. That's the main road. Probably 60% of our cases come in through that path. And then there's law enforcement notification, which in my case goes, you busy? Because my world's fixing to change with that question. I love that part of my job. It does not bother me at all, because it's when you have that kind of relationship with the other professionals you work with, things happen quicker, better, and usually with more definition. That includes getting that call at 1 a.m. Hey, we're on a homicide. You're going to be involved in this. You might as well show up. So I don't have that statewide intake blessing. I will take care of that. Takes a phone call. Wow. Get up out of bed, get dressed, go to the scene. Now, I was in crime scene for almost 14 years, my tenure with Mesquite. And I have a great appreciation for how crime scenes are handled and a lot of respect for never walking through one without permission or making sure I don't have other people from the state doing the same. So to me, Crime scenes are sacrosanct. It's the reason a lot of bad guys aren't hurting kids right now is because crime scenes were done correctly. Or emergency response telephone call from partners. And I'm going to talk about this chain of partners here in just a minute because that's what helps us function as well. And it's what helps the CACs across Texas function is partnership because it's not just what we're called, it's what we are. In law enforcement, like I explained, we have federal, state, county, and local law enforcement that we partner with. There's a rule in law enforcement, never trust anybody, even though you know. But there's also a rule that says if I meet you and I give you my business card, you give me your business card, and we speak to each other, now you have to answer the phone if I call. It's an unwritten rule, but it works really, really well. So I'm huge in establishing contacts and liaisons with people that I may need one day. I don't care what they need from me, that's fine. We also work with quasi-official agencies such as NetMec. Anybody ever heard of NetMec? It's the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. These are the posters you see walking into Walmart. NetMec is responsible for collecting huge amounts of data on every missing child. And they cooperate with us and law enforcement. In fact, sometimes they act like a marriage broker. They pull this FBI agent out of Oklahoma City and this SI out of Amarillo, and they marry them on the spot. And said, y'all going to have to work together. We have information so this kid's in one of your areas. And NetMec's kind of fun to play with. My contact guy for NetMec, for whatever roulette reason, was in California, who just recently retired, and I miss the guy. I don't miss many people from California, but I miss this guy because he was really funny and he was really serious about his job. And he knew exactly what he needed from me when he asked for something, and he knew exactly what he needed to get from me if I needed to ask him for something. So they are a non-governmental agency. They are privately funded. They're not holding anyone, but they are the keepers of the data. I can't tell you how many pedophiles are in jail because NetMec did their job. I can't tell you how many pornographic images are taken off the internet or rooted out of this horrible labyrinth that they exist in because NetMec's been collecting them. They have facial recognition that runs 24 hours a day, 7 days a week on missing children and all this horrible trash no one wants to believe is on the computer, just to see if this child shows up in any of that. And it works. The stuff comes in, hey, this kid was missing 4 years ago, but we've got his image on this thing, and this thing says it was taken 3 days ago in Enid, Oklahoma. Can you help us? Do what we can. I know what we can. It's kind of nice, but they're part of that law enforcement block as well. Medical, we have not just medical, but a lot of different medical. Anyone associated with the term SANE nurse. SANE nurse is a sexual assault nurse examiner. So saying SANE nurse is saying everything twice, but SANE nurses are wonderful people. They are all very well trained. On top of having their medical training, they're trained in court presentation, evidence preservation, and collection. SANE nurses meet with our children. They talk to them. They're a safe, nice clinic. The clinic for us here in Smith County is actually right in our office. They don't have to go to a hospital, which is a really scary place for kids who have been victimized because it's full of adults who wear masks, and it's just scary. But here we have, the room is decorated in two motifs. One is candy bars, which is big Butterfinger pillows and things like that, and there's superheroes all over the wall. So it's a very kid-friendly, very kid-inviting environment. They're seen by a very good medical professional. And whatever evidence the same nurse collects can be used in a trial or hearing. In fact, it's one of the few times when you hear the term hearsay evidence. What they get as hearsay evidence is totally admissible because it's what's told to the medical professional in the stint of her evaluation. We also have medical examiners. These are the people that do autopsies, that collect data on unsolved deaths or investigated deaths. We have a private firm here in Tyler that does forensic examinations. And we have the Dallas County medical examiner that pretty much covers all of Northeast Texas, because there's not another one outside of these private industries. The decision on whether to send the body one place or the other is always up to a local justice of the peace. So it doesn't matter to us. We go. Unfortunately, my ID says the state of Texas on it, and they're pretty liberal about sending me wherever the heck they think I need to be. And then we have child abuse forensic medical. These are specialized doctors, mostly at children's hospitals, that are experts in determining abuse and neglect of children. That's their job. They teach that course in medical school. I call them the ducks, because when I go in there, there's this duckling following of these little medical students that follow them everywhere. And they'll sit down in a room about half this size. We've got this big screen. Okay, we're looking at head injury. You know, this special investigator's here, and we're going to discuss his, head trauma case. Here's these slides of horrible, is this kid still alive? And they're going over treatment options and what they're doing. And all these little ducklings are on their little iPads. They used to be pens and paper. And they're taking notes and they're getting everything ready. And we depend on them because they're also trained expertly in how to write an affidavit. And I know you've heard what an affidavit is. Many of you are expected to write affidavits. They write a medical affidavit that was really hard to shake. They're putting their medical opinion in that affidavit, but that's based on a lot of training above and beyond medical school. And then under legal, we have, like I said, defense attorneys, prosecutors, and district attorneys. Yeah, okay. It's pretty obvious why we talk to district attorneys. That's who handles all the criminal investigations and prosecutions. The prosecutors can be very different people within the DA's office, depending on the type of crime. And of course, defense attorneys. And when I say we work with defense attorneys, we supply whatever they demand as far as what the legal requirements are, and cooperate in that. We understand they have a job to do. They understand we have a job to do. And they don't always see eye to eye. But we still work with them because that is our job. And I was asked to explain what a typical day was, and the best I can do is show you some pictures. The timer up there is always ticking. There is a timer that goes off for every case that comes on my desk. We have a 2-day limit to do this. We have a 1-day limit to do that. We have a 30-day limit to do this. Oh, and there's a 20-day limit to find the kids. If you can't find the kids within 20 days, it's 7 days. So timers always tick. It's always going. Everyone else thinks we just wear the Sherlock Holmes hat and we run around with magnifying glass and we solve crimes by intuition. That doesn't happen. We spend a great deal of time every day driving somewhere. Like I said, we cover 27 counties here in Northeast Texas. I have worked in over 40 counties in Texas, from Abilene to San Antonio, Austin, Houston. I got really bad experiences being stuck in Houston last year. It was the end of February, all of March, and part of April, right up until May. And I got stuck living in a hotel in Houston and working cases there because things got turned upside down. And the other, of course, is typing. I wish I got paid by the keystroke. I'd be a much wealthier man than I am. But documentation is everything. Everyone reads our documentation, including those pesky defense attorneys who get copies. I love reading CASA documentation when we need it and can get it, because I'm probably not going to read it as much as I'm going to look for your phone number in there somewhere, and I'm going to call you and ask you what I need. CASA volunteers are, like I said, very grounded with the child. And if I've got a kid that comes up missing, you're probably going to get a call from me, because you know stuff no one else knows. And if it helps me find that kid, that's what my job is. It's been a very successful, I can honestly say, I don't think I've ever had a negative CASA experience. Not through my profession. Then the phones. I'm kind of not allowed to go anywhere without my state phone. Even we went to Colorado a couple of weeks ago. It rang several times. I answered it when I could. But the phones are going off. And then the Lone Ranger, I had to throw that in there. Number one of my favorite shows growing up. But to the clients we represent, a lot of times special investigators appear like the Lone Ranger. We ride in, we fight the bad guys, we help the good guys, and we ride out. And you may not ever see us again. And you guys don't have that luxury. You're in it for the long haul. But a lot of my clients tell us, this is just how it is. You're going to see me for a little bit. I'm going to be here to help out. I'm going to pass you off to this CDS worker. They've got your case. They're going to be able to help you with everyday questions. They're going to help you find stuff you need. They're going to help you with services that you need. I can't do that. I only have several bullets. I don't have Band-Aids. I don't have all that other stuff you need. But we often feel like it. But we're all so thankful for anybody who's in it for long term. I'm so thankful for the people I work with at the CAC who do therapy and counseling for these families. And we do whole families. And sometimes everybody needs it. And that's what helps the kid the most. Speaking of jurisdiction, this is my jurisdiction. The state of Texas. There's a lot of it. There are 12 regions in the state of Texas. We are in Region 4. Region 5 is everything south of Cherokee County. We are everything north of Angelina County. We are everything, of course, east of Louisiana, south of Oklahoma, and everything, west of Louisiana, east of Kaufman and Hunt counties. That composes our Northeast Texas area. But it doesn't stop the state from sending me wherever they want because it says Texas on there. And that's our authority. Are there any questions about anything I've taught? I know I've thrown a lot of information at everybody really fast, but I'm wide open to any kind of questions you got. I'll pull up my bag of tricks. One of the most common questions about special investigators: do you arrest people? No. Our investigations are civil. We respond to civil courts. We have our authority through civil law. Again, when you talk about the family code and the education code, we do not. We have to be very knowledgeable with the penal code and the code of criminal procedure, which is what law enforcement operates under, because we have to talk these languages. It's almost like being bilingual. We speak police and speak it really well. And that's appreciated from both sides because we understand what pressures they're under to get their investigations done, to get their people picked up, to get their warrants, or their frustration and we don't have enough. And if I can provide a teaspoon of information that's going to help them have enough, that's my job. That's what protects this child. But we work together, and that's the best thing I can say about my job is it wouldn't even exist if we didn't do it with other people. And like I said at the beginning, I am here standing on the shoulders of a lot of amazing professionals that taught me this craft. And they taught me how to do it, and they shared with me their experiences. And they showed me how to do it, and I'm doing the same now. But it's not because I was born with this innate ability to go out and do this. People ask me in my family, oh, how does he do that? I could never do that job. Okay, what do you do? Because I could never do whatever it is you do. You're an accountant. I'm never going to darken your door or threaten your job. It's not what I do. I'm also not a brake technician. But I am a special investigator. It is what I do. It's what I've done for going on 13 years now. And I thrive in the environment I'm in just because I'm surrounded by professionals and team members and partners. true partners. Oh, yeah.
How much has the crisis at the border added to?
You know, that's a great question. It's a political question, unfortunately, because when it first started, and we're going to go back almost 8 years ago, 9 years ago, when these kids were showing up without parents and being pushed over. The first thing, when that news story hit, the first night, they know, oh God, they're going to send us all to the border. We're going to have to be working these cases. The federal government stepped in and said, no, this is our, not your, you're not touching this kid. Okay. So what are you going to do? You don't have CPS. There's no federal CPS. They don't exist. But they all thought they could handle it until they got down there and found out it wasn't 20, 30, 40, 50 kids. It was close to 2,300 for the first week. And they didn't have places for them to sleep. They didn't have places for them to go to the bathroom. It was a mess. But because of politics, we got kicked out of it. But your question
was out, if I could go through it or not. Okay. Going to the doctor. 12:45. It's 12:45. Okay.
Hey, everyone, friendly reminder to please have your microphones on silent. If you do have a question, though, and you are in Zoom world, feel free to drop it into our chat or just unmute yourself and ask the question.
No, but very relative to today, what are we doing about the crisis of children and families at the border? Well, the answer is really complicated because people don't have permanent addresses. People don't have ways to contact them except for whatever phone we're giving them. And I don't know what quality or service is connected to that. We're shipping kids off to other states with their families. So it's a great political question. Unfortunately, I'm not a politician. Well, fortunately, I'm not a politician. I can say that we get involved for certain things, just depending on whether or not a judge says we need to be involved. But at this point, that needle has stayed in the federal realm for the most part. I don't know what they've done differently. My heart rests with the poor people who are having to do enforcement at that level because they are naked in the desert with enemies that are heavily armed all around. So that's a tough job. Don't think I could do it anymore. But the kids, I'm sorry, I got involved years ago because of an 18-wheel that was found in San Antonio. Everybody burned up in this town, including children. We had no idea who they were, no documentation. No one got out alive. Temperatures in there were over 135 degrees. And I asked, well, what do you think they do? So we've got 3 people identified. We need to make sure if there's family members, they escaped. They ripped the floorboard out of the trailer. The little kids got through the floorboards. And the adults couldn't get through it. They were on 2 weeks to even drive. So that was messed up. And unfortunately, I see a lot of messed up stuff. One of the things that I always try to tell people about how weird about job is. When I was patrolling the Mesquite, I worked 4 in the evening till 2 in the morning. I love that shit. It's when all the stuff's going. Kept me really busy. Plus, it gave me 3 days a week off, and they were Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. You know, I love having those days off. Monday off, great. You do all the rat killing in the world you need to do. Well, every night I would go home at 2 in the morning, had the same ritual, take my stuff off, put it in the safe, go through, check on each of my kids, and go to bed. One morning, my son, who's 23 now, he was maybe 6. He's asleep in bed, and I grabbed him and I held him tight. I woke him up a little. looks at me with one eye and goes, bad night. Bad night. Okay. Went right back to sleep. He knew that's what that was about. And I had witnessed working a really horrible traffic accident. First child I ever saw killed in a child seat. It was that massive accident. There was no way for anybody to survive. But it was hard. Like I said, I carry all this with me and all that stuff because I look at every child as a potential victory in what we do. And again, I'm very thankful that God has put us here to do what we do and that CASA's here to do their part, because I'm going to tell you right now, when you get that phone call from me, I'm not doing it just to get another check on my check what things do. I'm probably at the end of people I can call, because I don't like to bother anybody that's doing this voluntarily and doing it well and doing it for the court, not for me. But if I call you, I really need something. And that's what it's about. All of you are aware of the need for secrecy and the need for protecting clients' interests, especially when talking about stuff you know that no one else knows. Why do you know it? Because you're trying to help this kid through the trauma of whatever happened. Same thing for us. But if we're in a case together and we're covered under the same umbrella, the same judge, it allows for some wiggle room and be able to talk to each other. So that's where we get the authority to do that. Any questions about any of the inner working stuff? Like I said, there's only 180 of us spread through the state. We do get called to do some of that stuff. Let's see, forget how many times I've been to Austin. Texas, like any large organization, different stuff happens in different places at different times. When you're in Austin, 38% of their people quit in 3 months. The CPS desks were empty everywhere you looked in their offices. So they grabbed a bunch of SIs from all the state. Lucky us. You're going to Austin. No. Austin's weird. Keep it weird. Keep it away from me. Keep me away from me. And so, we're going to get you a hotel in a real car and you're going to go save one case at a time. And they would hand you, the first night you hand you a stack of unworked cases. Go for it and do good. And we did it. And same thing in Houston. Only these cases were all residential child care cases. Every kid I was dealing with probably had a CASA one. But none of the kids were still there by the time I got there because they were really abandoned. These kids had already been placed somewhere else and were already somewhere. I couldn't even interview 90 of things. But we had to complete the investigation, which is a little hard when there's nobody to. So it's involved a lot of sitting around watching video. Oh, this did happen. Oh, that's nasty. Why were they letting them fight like that? I don't know, but the adults just sat down in the chair and started watching it like it was entertainment. So I think I know how to close this case. I've been sent so many different places to do stuff like that. But we do kind of run in, like I said, it's kind of a long range of feeling. We run in, we fix the problem, and we go home. Like I said, I'm assigned to Smith County right now. I have 3 or 4 Gregg County cases on my caseload, just because I was the only guy available to go do those. Got several in Cherokee County, because I was the only guy available to go do those. We play Russian roulette a lot with our assignments, just because the person who would geographically be the person who normally get it may not be available. Other questions?
It looks like we might have Don Houston. Do you have a question?
Let's see.
Oh, that's a lot of people.
You had quite the amount.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Out of the children, teens that go missing out of conservatorship, what percentage, just guessing, or maybe you actually know a real statistic on this, do you think are going home to family members, escaping to some, like a relative, versus the percentage that are becoming trafficked?
I'm very prejudiced on that because my biggest fear is that they're being trafficked, because that's when the bad things happen. I've recovered so many children out of trafficking because of working in these task forces. We develop relationships. Like I said, CASA's helped me find several missing kids just because that kid's still calling the CASA work. They won't call their biological parents. They won't call anybody else that they're connected to, but they'll call their CASA rep just because they know somebody will listen to them. There's almost no judgment from that. And the kids need that in their life. They need validation. They need to feel like they're being treated like something besides just another case or just another kid. But because of the way stuff comes to me, it's overwhelming how many kids are going straight into being tracked. Whether they say it's voluntary or not, I'm sorry, a 14-year-old cannot volunteer to do this. I have 7 kids. I have 6 boys and 1 girl.
Where's
She's
she at?
16. She's in the middle. She's third from the end.
Wow.
But 1 girl. And I get really probably close to mean when I'm having to deal with these teenage girls who are being trafficked. We do have boys that are trafficked, just not as many, and probably fewer that would ever admit it. It's not something anyone brags about, but our society has gotten so weird culturally that some of these kids brag about being trafficked because they had fancy clothes. They were living in hotels, Best Western, but they're living in hotels. And they're getting McDonald's every day. That's not a dreamland. That's not what Disney movies are made out of. But unfortunately, to answer your question as honestly as I can, I have no idea what the numbers are. And the numbers are always going to be skewed on that because the same kid may run away 5 times. And every time they're recovered, they go back to whatever the state comes up with to try to find a fix to keep them from running away. We just had a last week, new rules for kids who are in CWAP. Do y'all know what CWAP you do with it? CWAP is when we find a kid who has run away from their adopted placement and we're having to babysit them in either an office or a hotel or whatever until they can be reassigned to a new placement. In that CWAP, our problem has always been, and we've complained about this since day one, why are you letting these kids have phones? Who do you think they're calling? They're a pimp. Here's the address. Here's my room number. Here's where I'm at. Come get me at 1 o'clock. And we're going, what do you want us to do? They finally allowed us to start taking their phones last week. So it's a big help when and it's so hard for judges to say, well, that's their link to the world. It's a virtual generation. Yeah, it's how they get hurt. Probably how they met their first pedophile. Probably how they met their first pimp. It's probably how they met the first person that ever hurt them. So what good is it? And if you want to allow them a couple of phone calls a day that are monitored, I understand it ain't pretty, it ain't the best. But if it keeps that kid alive and it keeps that kid thriving, why not do it? And I'm so happy something finally worked in a positive way. Yes.
I want to know how you sleep at night.
Very well.
How do you turn it off? I mean, do you?
I get to talk about it with one of the greatest people in my life. She listens to me and she lets me rant and rave and complain. And she knows how to do that.
And then you
she's the best
just
thing
feel
ever.
like you can turn it off.
It's never off, but I came to grips back in the 80s. I can't change everything I want to change. And I can't do everything I want to do. But I can do more than most. And I love to talk about the victories that we have with children because there are victories to be had. There are kids that are saved by their CASA workers. Thank God for them. And they're a kid that didn't kill himself because he got in touch with his CASA worker. And there's kids that come back out of being in the traffic of life because they have one conduit that they trust. And that conduit is a CASA worker who knows how to access the pipeline and get help. And they know that you may call me, but I've got a DPS sergeant standing right behind me that has a whole bunch of quickly mobile, heavily armed people that are able to go out there and rescue this kid. It's kind of fun to call him. Hey, go here. But no, I sleep well. Some cases are harder to deal with than others. I've seen some really horrible things. No, took a survey a few years ago. How many autopsies have you been to? I was in a crime scene for almost 14 years. And since I've been here at the CAC in Dallas, I mean, for a year and a half, I was the only SI at the CAC in Dallas. So my only 3 kinds of cases that I kept for about a year and a half were child deaths, serious bodily injuries, and sexual assaults every day. I had as many as 3 child deaths in a day that came in, and I was averaging over 3.5 child deaths a month that I was working all the way through. So a normally high amount, and plus being in Dallas, we caught autopsies from all over Northeast Texas because that's where the bodies were sent. So I would meet with, what time are we doing?
I'm sorry.
What time are we doing?
We are here till 1:30.
Okay, I get to tell you Brandon's story. It's my favorite case study to tell, and it fits in with what you're talking about. Several years ago, I was on call. It was, I believe, a Sunday night. The phone rings. I was working at the CAC in Dallas. And the phone rings, said, hey, I've got this deal going on. I need you at Children's Medical Center to witness a 2-year-old girl who's being examined to make sure she's okay. Okay. Get up, get dressed, go to the hospital, go to the ER, ask for this kid. They send me in the room, and I get there, and it's this delightful, gorgeous, little, cute girl. And she's 2.5 years old. She can talk a little bit. And she doesn't know what's going on, but the nurses are really friendly. And she gets a medical exam. Now, I don't stand there and watch her for all of it, but I'm there to hear if there's any problems, especially if I find anything. She's fine, not a bruise, not a bump, not anything on her. So I have no idea what all is going on yet. Then I find out, well, they're working a homicide on a relative of this little girl, and apparently she was present when it happens, and we're having her checked out. She looks at one on her. And so I called it in, told them what happened. Well, we're going to let her go with her grandmother tonight, and the grandmother knows to keep in touch with us. I need you to meet with these detectives at 7 o'clock in the morning at the medical examiner's office, which is literally across the street, across the highway from where I'm standing. It's off 530, right across from Children's Medical Center, at 35. So I said, okay. So I drive, it's late at night. I come home, get up 6:30, just go in and try to beat the Dallas traffic to get to the medical examiner's office on time. And 2 deputies from the Hunt County Sheriff's Office come in. And again, I'm working in Dallas, but body came here from Hunt County. So they're from Greenville. They show up, and the kid that's having an autopsy is a 3-year-old boy who's missing his leg from the right knee down. It's an amputation. He has a prosthetic that they brought in where the doctors want to see that sort of thing when they do these autopsies. But that's where anything normal stopped. Most autopsies, the initial external examination is anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes. He looked for any bruising, marks. It took almost an hour to do the examination because there were so many marks. There was so much bruising. They'd already done what they call a skeletal survey, which is an x-ray of all the bones in the body. And there was a compound fracture of both the lower arm bones on the left side. Kid suffered a brand new fractured left arm. It was bad. And there was a mystery scar, well, 2 mystery scars. One was a set of marks all over his body that were like little snake bites, side by side, parallel, but evenly set, so they're made mechanically. Trying to figure out, what are those from? But the mystery mark was this 2.5 inch by 2.5 inch bird right in the center of his chest. Looked like a piece of burnt toast right in the center of his chest. Couldn't figure that one out either at first. So the deputies start telling me what happened in their investigation. Turns out about 12 o'clock at night, they get a call through dispatch that there's a kid who stopped breathing. And they're on a bridge going over I-30 outside of Greenville. What the family didn't know when they called this in, there was an ambulance at the next exit down the road fixing to clear an accident scene without a transport. So they're there in seconds, not minutes. And they get out, and this kid is just coming out of rigor, which means this kid's been dead 6 to 8 hours. Call. Well, they start calling deputies. Guess where the deputies are coming from? Same accident, sitting right down. They're right there. They know something's very wrong. This kid's laid in the back seat with a blanket. They said we were driving around, and why are you out here in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the night? This kid who's been dead, and they have this little girl in the car. Well, to explain who everybody is, Brandon is our child. The little girl is his cousin. The mother of the little girl is Brandon's aunt. She is the sister of the mom. And she's married to the father of the little girl. Are we okay on that? Brandon is the visiting cousin of this family. Mom lives in Dallas. That's where I come in again. I gotta go find mom to tell her that her son's as part of this investigation out of Hunt County. Well, then we get this information. Mom's on her 3rd CPS investigation, just ended a couple of weeks before. And she moves a lot and live in different addresses. And she just recently made a posting on Facebook. She couldn't wait to get back on the pole because she was not a dancer. And she had a boyfriend who was one of the most feared drug dealers in Southwest Dallas. Those weren't fun words to hear. So I get an address, and I get with another SI from the Dallas office, and we go to deliver this message. We call the police first because of this drug dealer boyfriend is supposed to be, and he was the subject of the last case we had with Brandon. Turns out, nobody would come to the door. I'll take my card and let police contact me as soon as possible, put it in the door, take a picture of it being in that door to prove that I delivered this message, took pictures of the cars that were in the driveway. And we had 5 police officers with us. They were coming through. They don't like this guy either. They're going to bring it out here. They can bounce it and start it. Turns out Brandon had CPS history. First 2 were medical in nature. Like I said, he was born and had his leg amputated. Mom has told the exact same story to every social worker and every worker that's connected to Brandon since Brandon was born of how Brandon came to miss his leg. Her story was that while she was pregnant, Brandon's father beat her and caused this deformity while Brandon was in vitro. That's not what happened. And I'm going to make this short because I know we're good at time constraint. Turns out, after Brandon's dead and I go digging up medical records because that's part of my job, I go to where he was born. And he was born in Dallas at the other children's hospital, Medical City Children's. And I go there and they give me the records. And the doctor who performed the surgery just happened to be on duty that day. And the records guy said, he's here, you can call that number. I call it expecting, staff person. The doctor answers the phone. That never happens to me. That never happened. He said, oh yeah, I remember that case. I said, why is the leg gone? He said, oh, the tube was wrapped around the leg at the knee. None of the material for bone or muscle mass formed below the knee. And therefore, at day one, we did the where they cut the leg off and created a cap so that he could walk with a prosthetic when he got big enough. Is that normal? About 1.5 million births. Okay. Thank you. I'd have never known that. So now I know, well, that was a lie then. Because I asked him, could this have been caused by anyone beating on a woman who's pregnant? No, it's just kind of how the tube goes while they're pregnant. Okay, thank you. So I share that with the sheriff's deputies. 2.5 hours later, I get a call. Hey, it's the mom calling me. You left a note in my door? I said, yes, ma'am. Are you going to be home for the next 30 minutes? Yes. I'll be back over in just a little bit. Same drill. Now it's after 3 o'clock. The police department has changed shifts. No one knows what I'm talking about when I call back in. So I do the whole thing over again. Hey, we're going to go to this house. He's a drug dealer. We need to talk to mom. This child's been killed and they need to talk to her. Okay. Now 7 officers show up. Apparently evening shift had more people than they we get there. Mom's yay big. Don't deal with boyfriends, but yay big. Is this what everybody's afraid of? And I'm this. And so I'm talking to mom and I'm telling her, I'm not telling her anything about Brandon. I have not mentioned his status. I've not said anything because I want to know what she's got to ask. So I give her the police captain's name in Hunt County. I said, you need to contact this person as soon as possible. Here's the address for the sheriff's office. I need you to go there and talk to them as soon as you can. Now, for those of y'all who have never driven from here to Hunt County or Greenville, it's about 1.5 hours, 2 hours, depending on how much bad traffic is on. This was at 3:30 in the afternoon. She showed up at the sheriff's office at 9 o'clock. By the way, the whole time we're having this conversation, the boyfriend stands behind her. Like he's going to use her for his human shield in case something goes bad, because there's all these uniformed police officers around. And they're all waiting for him to do something stupid. And he's just, every now and then, he's like a little groundhog. Go see him pop up. You're something anyone's afraid of. I guess he shoots everybody in the back. So I left. That's going on. During the autopsy, going back a little bit in time, after all that external examination, what we did conclude was they had officers at the crime scene, which was the house that the cousin and cousin's mom and dad lived at. It was out in the country. He worked for a ranch out there, and part of his rent was paid by him refurbishing the little house. He had tools and materials out everywhere. Mom had sent Brandon to live with her, I said sister, it's her cousin, because mom wanted time alone with boyfriend. And that didn't please me much, but when I did the CPS, I looked up all our previous incidents. First time she got involved with CPS is because she she showed up at Scottish Rite Hospital for this free prosthetic that she gets. As he gets older, he gets bigger, he needs to be refitted. He developed an infection at the amputation site. So they had to give him massive amounts of antibiotics and rewrap everything. And she was supposed to show back up in 5 days. She didn't show back up. So they called in a case. Of course, she had moved. And I'm going to keep mentioning that as part of the story. We finally find her. She goes back in, takes Brandon in, everything's okay. The infection's gone, but he needs to be refitted. Then she'll refit him. That case comes in as well. Get that straightened out, and she moves again. And in doing all this, a pattern's starting to jump out, but it's never going to the same caseworker. So no one's seeing it. No one's getting it. That happens. There's such a volume. So the third case is about a neighbor who's in her backyard, and she sees the boyfriend walk up to Brandon, who's on a swing, and he's yelling at Brandon to get in the house and come eat. And Brandon's just swinging. Now, the one-legged kid in the swing is kind of fun anyway. And he slaps Brandon and knocks him out of the swing. There's not a mark on me. They went out, they took pictures. We have one photograph of Brandon. He's sitting at the table with his prosthetic off, covering on the cover. It's the only photo I've got. Nowhere in those 3 investigations does anyone attempt to contact Brandon's dad. Anybody want to guess why? Because they all believe the lie. You mean he's the reason that kid's not got a leg? I'm not. You know why she's moving all the time? She's avoiding dad. He is just a farmhand. He's a working man, probably not making much more than minimum wage. He has spent thousands of dollars with attorneys and the judges there in Hunt County trying to hunt her down and serve her with visitation papers. He wants to see his son. But he can't, because he can't hunt her. And he can't serve her. And she's told this lie about him so many times, nobody's helping him. Turns out the little marks, they're side by side each other, were made by a belt that had 2 of the little tongs in the middle instead of 1. And every time that belt loop came around, every time it was 2 little teeth, they left a mark. So he was getting whipped with the hard end of the belt over and over and over. Those were those came. We found the belt, seized it as evidence. Burn mark was a little harder, finally figured it out. It was from an electric sander. He got it really hot, going over wood there in the house he was working on, and stuck it on his chest in the burn. The reason they were mad at Brandon, because Brandon was a very fidgety child. That's in all his casework. He's a real fidgety child, fidgets on it. Okay, you learn to walk with 1 leg. I got to give the kid some credit. He's learned to walk on a bad prosthetic because mom won't take him in for all his scheduled pre-appointments to get this done. And mom finally says, you know, enough is enough. You can go live with your cousins for a while. Brandon's had my heart ever since. And I tell this story in classes that I teach. I teach child death investigation and serious bodily injury investigation. And this is my favorite case study to go to. It was one of the most complicated things I've done in a long time. And I promised Brandon there'd be some justice here. This is part of Brandon's justice. I don't mind doing it. And it's therapy for me. Brandon also had this horribly broken arm. That was the problem. Brandon couldn't sleep because his arm hurt because he'd had his arm broken. Because he kept hopping around instead of going to bed. He'd get out of bed, hop, hop, hop to the bathroom, hop, hop, hop to the kitchen. The father would get up. I said the father. The father was a little girl would get up, put him back on the couch, tell him to go to bed. And he was getting persecuted. He wasn't getting any sleep. So he snaps. And he beats Brandon. And he beats Brandon. And he burns Brandon. Has broken his arm. And he's taken his prosthetic to keep him from walking anywhere. There's a special place for him. The prosecutors did a really good job putting the case together. Both these, I hate to call them parents, both these adults scheduled trials for capital murder. Father's was first. And I would get these calls all the time from the father. Are you ready? We're going to need you to testify. Are you going to be there? You were there for the job. So, okay, we're going to do all this. Fine, great. Let's do something good with him. So we're going for the death penalty. Okay. Well, the day of jury selection, day 1, guilty plea. He wants to avoid this Hunt County jury because he's heard what the history for capital cases in Hunt County are. They're almost 100% yes. So, spare me. He got 65 years. Then mom's trial came up a couple of months, 3 months later, same sort of thing. She got over 50 because she did nothing to everything. Did nothing to stop it. Was well aware of everything. Tried to hide. They even considered giving her an additional charge of tampering with evidence for moving the body. And they tried to do a cleanup of the crime scene. It took them a minute, but they found the bloody sandpaper in the trash can. It was really good evidence. They did a really good job on their end. And like I said, there's some justice that came about all this. The father was finally contacted. He gave us the story about everything. I've been trying to find her. She keeps moving. She wasn't hiding from CPS. She wasn't hiding from the law. She was just hiding from him. So he couldn't serve her and he couldn't get Brandon away. She didn't want Brandon. But so there's an agency within Texas that helps victims of crimes. And there's a check attached for little kids who die. Mom applied for that check. Mom didn't get that check. Mom was never prosecuted for a criminal offense. There wasn't one to attach to her. Couldn't get her. I had so many attorneys try. It was a blessing to see how hard they worked on it. But what happened was, Dad got told about this. And Dad arranged for burial in a private cemetery in Hunt County. Mom wasn't allowed to attend this funeral, which is a little bit of justice. And Dad finally got to say goodbye to his son. And Brandon got peace. I tell this story because I want you to see how many agencies are involved, how many professions are involved, how many people have walked through these kids' lives to make what we do possible. And it's never to say, well, this person did their job wrong or this person did that. I had nothing to do with it. Brandon probably could not have been saved from his situation because of who was in charge of Brandon. He had nothing to do with all this. But his story needs to be told because the things that did happen positive happened because of this team approach. The things that happened because CPS cooperated with law enforcement who cooperated with the district attorney who cooperated with medical. And they were happy to have all these records that we could go and pull up and find. And things worked out because everybody worked very hard. Now, my part in this, very small. It was and I got to tell you the story about the detective because it's funny. This was his first homicide. He'd been a narcotics detective for several years. He was good at what he did. He was good at interviewing people. He got a confession from his father. But he'd never worked a homicide. And he never worked a child homicide. So he goes, you ever work any of these? He goes, oh, yeah, you mind meeting me there tomorrow morning? Nope, not at all. So we sat down and ate lunch later and said, okay, I got all this. Now what? And we filled out 3 or 4 pages in a notebook of things immediately to do. I said, will you get with the sheriff, find out what the sheriff wants from you because you got to cover that. When you call the DA and you find out what the DA wants from you, you got to cover that. I said, but to make me feel better, I'd like to know this. And so we traded off paperwork and everything else. He did a phenomenal job for his first homicide, getting that stuff done. I just felt horrible for him. He said, this is not a starter kit. Yes, ma'am.
I think we might have a question on Zoom. Janie, did you have a question? You're unmuted.
Okay.
What happened to the little girl of the cousin?
Okay. Originally, she was removed, and the grandparents petitioned to get her back. There was a lot of legal back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. She ended up being adopted by family. Wasn't my first choice. But I only met her for a little bit. I mean, a little bit at the hospital at night. Just curious.
This is the specific cause of death.
Blood force trauma. Shock induced by blood force trauma.
Shirley, did you have a question on Zoom?
No, no, I don't. I'm having problems hearing, and I may be pushing some buttons that's not necessary. I'm sorry.
I apologize for not being heard. So if there's nothing else, and we have no other questions, I'm gonna let you go on time.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Do we have any more questions from anybody?